want to take note that we are starting the meeting at 7 p.m. sharp. Given the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency, we are conducting this meeting electronically, and we are able to do so because Governor Northam signed into law on April 22nd a legislative amendment to the budget bill that allows public bodies like ours to meet electronically without a physical quorum present. In order to discuss or transact the business that is statutorily required or necessary to continue our operations, our staff have followed the procedures and guidelines in that legislation to give notice to the commission, staff, and public, and this meeting is simultaneously being broadcast to the public on YouTube. All of our commissioners have been provided a scripted agenda, and that provides information on the logistics of participating in the meeting, as well as the order for roll call votes, as has been the case for the past few months. If you could follow that agenda, it will help us in your being ready to take a vote and move along as smoothly as possible. A quick reminder of our functions, which I think might be rote to everyone by now, but please do use the microphone icon on your computer to mute and unmute, regardless of whether you've joined audio via your computer or phone. If you're on your phone, you don't need to make any changes there by muting or unmuting. All you need to do is hit mute or unmute in that icon on the base of your screen. Again, as a reminder, we have that chat function available, and it might be helpful for resolving technical difficulties, but importantly, no public business may be conducted over that chat. So please do avoid commenting on the issues or substance of the reports. Finally, we will be hand raising again today. A quick reminder, and again, this is in your notes and your script for tonight, but if you wish to raise your hand, click on the participant button and then the hand icon next to your name in the participant list. Alan Fay is once again faithfully monitoring the hand raising and will let us know when there are questions. If you have any trouble finding that function, please, again, you can follow those instructions on your scripted agenda, or this would be a good thing to use the chat function for. So again, as has been the case the past couple of meetings, we're going to ask that everyone hold their questions and comments until the end of each presentation so that we can then go to raised hands and hopefully facilitate something akin to a conversation. And a final note, ongoing video conference protocols, please do mute your microphone when you're not speaking. That helps cut down on background noise, especially with so many people on the call today. As a reminder, when we have items that come up for a vote, you don't need to raise your hand to vote or to make or second the motion. Feel free to unmute yourself, jump in. If we're so fortunate as to have multiple people make or second a motion, then we can clarify. So I'm going to ask Ms. Gilchrist, our secretary, to please identify or please call the roll to identify.
Hi, this is Rhonda Gilchrist. Sorry, I can't answer.
She's also going to take a chance to identify the staff participating on the call. So Ms. Gilchrist, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Great. Please respond here or present. Chair Crystal.
Here.
Mr. Gary.
Here.
Mr. Alcorn.
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Here.
Mr. De Ferrenti.
Here.
Mr. Eben.
Here.
Ms. Filler-Korn.
Here.
Mr. Faust.
Here.
Ms. Garvey. Mr. Krizak.
Here.
Mr. Letourneau.
Present.
Mr. McKay.
Here.
Mr. Meyer. Mr. Meyer, I see you. Ms. Pelchak.
Present.
Mr. Reed.
Present.
Mr. Smedberg. Mr. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Mr. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Walken. Mr. Walkinshaw. I think you're having problems with your mute. I see you. Ms. Mitchell.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum. I'll now identify staff participating in the call and will include their titles for the benefit of the listening public. Executive Director Kate Mattice, NVTC Commission Secretary Rhonda Gilchrist, Director of Finance and Administration Scott, Director of Programs and Policy Alan Fay, will WMATA Program Manager Andrew DeVetter, Grants Manager and DB Officer Brittany Sumter, and IT Manager, Program Analyst Zachary Smith, NVTC Legal Counsel Steve McIsaac, Acting VRE Chief Executive Officer Rich Dalton, and WMATA's Virginia Government Relations Officer Greg Potts. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gilchrist. And everyone, it's really nice to see you, albeit virtually. So I trust everyone had a chance to review the agenda and our meeting materials, in addition to recognizing a new commissioner who will round out our full complement of Northern Virginia Transportation Commissioners. We also have several action items on our consent agenda. We also have a report on WMATA, as well as commuter choice, VRE, DRPD, and one from our executive director. And again, the meeting agenda is presented on the screen for your reference. So more happy news as well for our commission. I'm so pleased to announce that on June 22nd, the commission was notified that Senator John Bell has been appointed to NVTC to fill the final vacancy remaining on the commission. Senator Bell was officially sworn in as a commissioner earlier this week, but as is our custom, we administer a ceremonial oath of office to welcome him as a new commissioner. So Senator Bell, we'll try to do this with no lag in real time. If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me, and please do unmute yourself. So, I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia.
And that I will faithfully discharge all the duties incumbent upon me.
And that I will faithfully discharge all the duties incumbent upon me.
As a member of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission.
As a member of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
Welcome. We are delighted to have you joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. So as we did last month, we have a resolution related to conducting an electronic meeting. We have also, our staff has hopefully provided opportunity for public comment prior to this meeting. So let me tee up Kate to introduce that resolution in front of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to do so. So what you have before you is Resolution 2416. Which is finding need to conduct the July 2nd, 2020 meeting electronically. It's identical to the resolution that we passed last month, with the exception of the change in date. This resolution allows NVTC to confirm that Governor Northam's declared emergency makes it both impractical and unsafe for the commission to assemble in a single location on July 2nd, 2020 to discuss and transact the business of the commission. Furthermore, the resolution states that the items on this meeting's agenda are statutory required or necessary to continue the operations of the commission and the discharge of the commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. In addition, according to the legislation signed by the governor in response to the public health emergency, any public body or governing board that convenes a meeting during the declared emergency via electronic means shall provide the public an opportunity to comment. And so we actually, in advance of this meeting, did solicit written comments through social media, press releases, as well as on our website. And we did not receive any comments as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. And so I'm happy to pass this back to you, Chair Crystal, for taking action on the resolution.
Thank you so much. So we'll briefly pause for questions. Here would be a great time to use that raise your hand function if you do have a question about either the resolution about our electronic meeting or about the lack of comments, I suppose, rather than the substance of the public comments. So, Mr. Fye, are we seeing any hands raised?
No hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll move then to call for a motion to approve resolution number 2416.
So moved.
Second, David Reed.
All right, moved by McKay, seconded by Mr. Reed. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Our commission secretary will now call for the vote. Ms. Gilchrist.
Chair Crystal.
Yes.
Mr. Gary.
Aye.
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Bell.
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Mr. De Ferenti.
Aye.
Mr. Eben.
Aye. Aye.
Ms. Filler Korn.
Aye.
Mr. Faust.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Krezak. Aye. Mr. Letourneau.
Aye.
Mr. McKay.
Aye.
Mr. Meyer.
Aye.
Ms. Pelchik.
Aye.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg. Mr. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
And Ms. Mitchell voting as alternate since Mr. Smedberg didn't vote.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you very much. So our next action item is to approve the minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on June 4th. Those are before us for approval, and I am looking for a motion to approve them.
So
Move
moved.
approval of the minutes, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay. All right. Rhonda, if you've got that, I think it's all right if I didn't.
I did not get that.
Okay. I think our second
Eileen Filler-Corn.
motion.
I moved.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Walkinshaw, were you our second? I'm so sorry. Could our second identify themselves again?
I heard McKay.
Okay, thank you so much. All right.
Okay, but
So-
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Any further discussion about the minutes of our previous meeting? Mr. Fye, any hands raised?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, so hearing no further discussion, our secretary will call the roll for this vote. Please respond yay, nay, or abstain.
Chair Crystal.
Yay.
Mr. Gary.
Aye.
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Bell. Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Dave Ferranti.
Aye.
Mr. Eben.
Aye.
Ms. Filler-Corn.
Aye.
Mr. Faust. Mr. Faust.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Yes.
Mr. Krezak.
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau.
Aye.
Mr. McKay. I saw that, Mr. McKay. Mr. Meyer.
Aye.
Ms. Pelchik.
Aye.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg.
Aye.
Mr. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Motion passes. Turn it back to the chair.
Great, thanks so much. So we'll move next to our 6 items on the consent agenda. In brief, they are to appoint Speaker Eileen Filler-Corn to our executive committee, to authorize Ms. Mattice to submit the proposed NVTC Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Goal-Setting Methodology for fiscal year 2021 through 2023 to the Federal Transit Administration, to approve the award of the Commuter Choice Contract Marketing, to approve the Commuter Choice Marketing Website Services Contract, to authorize our executive director to sign the DRPT Master Agreement, and to authorize the executive director to execute a contract for government relations. Finally, to authorize the executive director to send a letter to Amada requesting data on uses of dedicated capital funding. One thing to note is that the commission is being asked to appoint Speaker Eileen Filler-Corn as the General Assembly representative to the NVTC Executive Committee. We want to emphatically thank Senator Eben for his service heretofore on the Executive Committee, and he will remain the General Assembly member on the NVTC Legislative and Policy Committee. We welcome the active participation of all of our new members representing the legislature in all of our committees. Staff will take care to include you on all committee invitations and materials per the interest that you have expressed. And as a reminder to everyone, in fact, the committee meetings are open to all commissioners and the public. So let me pause for any questions if folks would like to raise hands about any items on our consent agenda.
No, No hands are raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, hopefully we're not moving too fast, but, oh, was that a comment? Okay. So seeing no comments, I think we have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
McKay,
I'm so
second.
sorry. If you could identify yourself when you make a motion, I think that would help me out.
Senator Bell, I made the motion.
Excellent. Thanks, Senator.
McKay, second.
Great. Thank you. All right. With no further discussion, I will again turn to our secretary to call for a vote.
Chair Crystal,
Yes.
Mr. Gary,
Aye.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Bell,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Dave Ferrenti,
Aye.
Mr. Evan, Mr. Evan,
Aye.
Ms. Filler-Korn,
Aye.
Mr. Faust,
Aye.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Krizik,
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau,
Aye.
Mr. McKay,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, Mr. Meyer, Ms. Pelchak,
Yeah.
Ms. Pelchak,
Yes. Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
The motion passes. I turn it back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilchrist, and thank you everyone for bearing with us. That should be the last of our lengthy votes for tonight, although we do have some important informational items before us. So beginning with the WMATA Transportation, or excuse me, WMATA, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. I'm going to invite reports on both the COVID-19 response and general reports of our WMATA board members. If you could perhaps be willing to hold your questions to the end, please feel free to put up a hand at any point during the presentation, but we'll go through all of the content and then revisit questions next. So did I hear correctly that Mr. Smedberg is not with us this evening?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
You are, excellent. Thanks, Bill.
I was on
Welcome
mute.
you, and,
I was on mute earlier. Sorry about that.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me welcome you, Ms. Letourneau, to give a brief update on current activities at WMATA, first responding to the COVID-19 public health crisis, and then as well as any other items before you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a reminder to folks. I know we have several new commissioners to the meeting, so Matthew and I thought it would be important to just remind folks that in late May, the WMATA board approved an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 operating budget. The amended budget utilizes all of the remaining CARES Act money available to WMATA to cover operating costs associated with COVID-19, offset revenue losses, and provide one-time subsidy credits to funding jurisdictions who are also seeing declining revenues. The board also deferred for 6 months all fare and service changes that were approved as part of the fiscal year 21 budget. The board may revisit or further defer or revise these changes depending on conditions in the future. Also in May, the WMATA implemented the stabilization phase of its three-phased recovery plan. The stabilization phase is the first phase of the recovery plan and provides enough Metro Rail and Metro Bus service to accommodate a limited amount of non-essential work travel. WMATA also recently made adjustments to the stabilization phase to address crowding by reopening Metro Rail stations and increasing bus service. On June 29th, WMATA reopened 15 Metro Rail stations that were closed due to COVID-19 public health emergency. 3 stations on the Orange and Silver Line, Greensboro, East Falls Church, and McLean, will reopen for shuttle and local bus service only. The rail station will remain closed due to the ongoing platform reconstruction work at East Falls Church. Also, WMATA added buses to the system's busiest bus lines to provide more capacity and frequent service. To make these additions possible, WMATA will temporarily suspend bus service on 4 routes with low ridership. And you see those routes, they're listed in your meeting materials, and will reduce service on 7 lines. And WMATA continues to discourage the use of the system except for essential travel and requires the use of face coverings or masks on the system. The WMATA board authorized the negotiation of the fiscal year 2021 Passenger Rail Improvement and Investment Act, PRIA, funding agreement between DRP and WMATA. The federal funding, which WMATA receives annually under PRIA, requires a 50% local match that is allocated equally among the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. The FY 2021 PRIA agreement will extend the current agreement for an additional year with Virginia and continue to provide $50 million in PRIA matching funds already included in the fiscal year 2021 capital budget. And lastly, from my perspective, before we turn it over here to Mr. Letourneau, last month, the WMATA board approved a slate of officers for the fiscal year 2021 year. I was honored to be nominated again to be chair of the WMATA board for the coming 21 year. And Ms. Stephanie Givity from the district will serve as the first vice chair, and Mr. Michael Goldman of Maryland will remain as second vice chair in fiscal year 2021. So I'm honored to do that. I'll be reaching out to the full board members over the next couple of days, talking about committee assignments and plans for moving forward with Mr. Wiedefeld and Matt. I've already talked to you, but I'll follow up with you a little later on. Matt, turning it over to you.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Well, first of all, as a member of the nominating committee, thank you for accepting the nomination to continue as the Metro Board Chairman. We're excited to have you continue in that role and for the leadership that you provided, the stability you provided on the Metro Board over the past year, and since I've been part of it, has been really important. A couple of additional updates. Last week's Metro Board meeting, we approved a charter to create a Metro Transit Police Department Investigations Review Panel. You might have seen something about this in some news coverage. The idea is for it to be an independent panel to make recommendations to the Metro Transit Chief of Police, Chief Pavlik, and the WMATA Board of Directors to improve police training, community engagement, and MTPD policies. I can tell you that we did look at some of the other models around, especially the one in Fairfax County, when we set up this group for WMATA. The recommendations will be based on the panel's review of the integrity of the investigation, the thoroughness, the fairness of the policies and the processes, and the adequacy of training. It will be a 7-member panel consisting of 3 police department members from across the region who were selected by Chief Pavlik and 4 citizen members from Virginia, Maryland, and DC appointed by the WMATA Board of Directors. So Paul and I will be having some discussions as it relates to the Virginia appointee. There are limitations to what Metro can do from a compact standpoint in this type of function. I know that the District of Columbia has been discussing potentially trying to change the compact for a more robust investigative review panel. That said, I think the Metro Board believes this is a really good step. Chief Pavlik has really shown a lot of leadership at Metro Transit Police, and I think the board overall is happy with the direction that Transit Police are going. But this is an additional layer of review that we'll be able to accomplish for MTPD's operations. We got some really good news on the platform improvement project at the Finance and Capital Committee. Work is progressing very well. Work at Vienna, Dunloring, West Falls Church, and East Falls Church is on track to be completed by Labor Day weekend, which was the previously announced goal for this. Due to COVID-19, as you know, WMATA combined the summer's platform improvement project with work on the automatic train control tie-in at Wheelie Reston East, which resulted in the closure of the Silver Line. And that was done really to allow for the platform work on the Orange Line to continue. It would have been too difficult for the crews out there to maintain those stations being open for this part of the project that's been going on over the last month or so. However, that project and the train control tie-in is actually ahead of schedule, which is something that those of us in government are not often used to hearing. And they will reopen 6 Metro Rail stations and restore Silver Line service on August 16th. So that is a few weeks ahead of Labor Day. The Metro Rail Safety Commission recently released an annual report on the safety of Metro Rail. We're going to be discussing this at next week's WMATA meeting, including a report on the derailment at Farragut West. I will point out, however, that due to some of the issues that the Metro Rail Safety Commission has raised in some of the discussion, the general manager has announced leadership changes at the Rail Operations Control Center in an effort to bring some fresh leadership into the ROC. And so we'll have potentially some more to discuss about that, but I wanted to mention it. A couple other issues for those of you who serve on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. You're aware that there's been some discussion about the traction power upgrade issue. This was a commitment that NVTA made in 2015 and 2017 to fund $22 million of upgrades on the Orange Line with the goal of getting 8-car trains into the Silver and Orange lines. In order to do that, the actual electrical mechanics of the track have to be upgraded in order to handle the capacity. NVTA's had some concerns about this project, and initially there was a recommendation from NVTA staff that NVTA de-obligate itself at $22 million. I have a lot of concerns about this because that funding has already been committed. The work on one of the projects has already been completed. The other one's already underway, and this was a previous commitment that NVTA had made. In addition, DC and Maryland have also provided matching funds for this project. We did have I think, very productive discussion a week ago between NVTA, Chairman McKay, Chair Randall, myself, Mr. Wiedefeld, Monica Backman, and many other staff members to try to work through these issues. I think on the Metro side, we're going to be able to provide a little bit better detail to NVTA about the path toward 8-car trains, the number of steps, and the timeline for that process. And then also some detailed information about WMATA's finances that I think would help alleviate some of the NVTA concerns. The bottom line for us, those of us in jurisdictions, is that if NVTA is not the $22 million funding source, then WMATA will have to send a $22 million bill to all of the WMATA jurisdictions, which is not something that I think anybody wants to hear or wants to see at this point in time, given the revenue concerns. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work through that. I did check in with WMATA today, and I'm expecting a great deal of information to be transmitted Monday morning from Metro to NVTA. That will include the letter and some of the backup documentation that we discussed on the call. And so I will continue to be involved and continue to have dialogue with some of the NVTA members, my colleague on the Latin board, Chair Randall, and certainly Ms. Crystal, Mr. McKay, and others to try to resolve this issue. Finally, I'll end on another good news. The Metro board voted with Paul and I we'll say leading the charge to refund a portion of expenditures related to the cinder bed situation that happened last year when there was a strike, of course, and service was not provided. So refunds were provided for about $1.5 million to the jurisdictions, the largest part of that, of course, going to Fairfax County. And the reason for that is a little bit different than other situations where there is an interruption of service. In this particular instance, WMATA itself was not incurring expenditures because it was not paying the contractor to provide the service. And so from a fairness standpoint, I think it made sense for WMATA to go ahead and refund the funds that it wasn't spending. There was, quite frankly, some resistance to doing that, but we were able to get that done. So that concludes my report.
Madam Chair, if I could, before you
Mr. Childers.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the work of Mr. Letourneau and the support we had from you and Mr. McKay with this NVTA issue. This was really important for WMATA, not only for the immediate needs we have, but also for the future needs we have, particularly along the Silver Line. And so it was really important that NVTA keep to that commitment for us. And so I really want to acknowledge the work that you all did to help, support us WMATA, in that. So really want to thank you all publicly for that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smedberg. I was in fact going to direct the same thanks to Mr. Letourneau in particular for getting involved in and helping address this so constructively. I think it is precedential, is that a word? And it sets precedent for how WMATA and the authority continue to work together. And as a member of the authority, I'll just take the opportunity to say that we are never going to be able to meaningfully see modal distribution of those authority dollars if there's not a good relationship between the authority and WMATA, because this is such an important system to the region. So really grateful to you and Chair Randall for leaning in on that.
Madam Chair.
Please.
I just wanted to also offer my thanks. I think this is a complicated matter. Mr. Letourneau's work and Chair Randall's to set up the call was definitely important. I think it's important for people to understand that, clearly our General Assembly members know, but NVTA has a special responsibility to make sure that every dollar they spend is put to work as quickly as possible on congestion relief. And I think this project, obviously, our money will be put to work quickly. And so establishing a written timeline obviously is important. With a project of this size and scale, those of us involved in big projects in years past, that schedules slide. And so we won't establish a schedule, but understand that, big projects, sometimes timelines do change. And I think we need to be flexible as NVTA in working on projects of this scale. But I think the most important thing is when we look at local governments, VDOT, and WMATA, and VRE for that matter, which are the largest applicants for funding at NVTA, that all of them are set up very differently. And that the standards that we hold for one don't always hold true for others. I mean, clearly WMATA is a multi-state compact, which we've talked about. VDOT has some efficiencies of scale that are different than local governments, and local governments are all different in size. And so when you look at the cost of these projects and the labor costs and other things associated with them, there's going to be some variable numbers that are in there. I think the most important takeaway from this is when it comes to WMATA is that, we establish timelines, we understand the reasons behind the budgets and the things that WMATA has submitted to us. But most importantly, and you noted this earlier, is that if this project weren't funded by NVTA, this project would be funded by local governments. And so those of us who represent jurisdictions that pay WMATA subsidies, which is everyone here from local government, these costs, if not picked up by NVTA, would be coming to us to pay for. And so we're all in this together, as many have said recently. WMATA is an important regional transit provider, and a lesson for us at NVTA is to stick to our principles of making sure that we're very responsible with every dollar that we spend, but also acknowledge that people who apply for dollars through the NVTA system cannot always be measured equally depending on the way that they're structured. And I just want to point that out, and that was clearly established on the call. WMATA made some commitments to NVTA for some data, which was really important and frankly, a really good outcome here for all the people involved in supporting transit. So just wanted to weigh in on that and thank everyone who was involved in the call. It was not a long call, but a very productive one to make sure that we stay on track.
And Madam Chair, if I could, I had Mr. Wiedefeld called and had a pretty thorough debrief, and I think he appreciated the opportunity to hear from everyone and have the opportunity to educate folks a little bit about WMATA and how it works and timelines and things like that, because it's not quite the same in every instance as it is maybe say with a road project or a sidewalk project or whatever. So he really appreciated that opportunity.
Great.
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Please. And I was actually just going to say, I'm going to go ahead and disregard the convention of hand raising. I think it's probably easier if people are just respectfully pipe up. So please.
I think it's up, but I can't really tell. Anyway, I also want to say thank you. I mean, I haven't been, following this super closely. Clearly, a lot of really important work has been done. And I want to thank everybody. And I just have sort of, I don't know if I guess it's a historic question or, a background question for myself. Listening to all of this, how often do you have a project where an organization like NVTA has committed funds and work has gone forward depending on that commitment and has leveraged other things, and suddenly NVTA pulls out. I mean, that's not got to be very often because it doesn't seem like a good way to do business or establish relationships. So clearly there's probably more backstory that I don't know.
Yeah.
But does this happen very often? I'm assuming not.
I would perhaps say that I think I'm a little cautious about our weighing in on this without any members of the authority staff, leadership, or the chair of the authority here to speak to it. But I think we could certainly connect you to any of those folks for a little bit of a follow-up briefing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm a PCAX, but where I think our meeting got canceled, but I can certainly.
There you go. I think that'd be a perfect place to raise that query.
Yeah, no,
Chair Crystal, I would just say that Ms. Garvey encapsulated a concern that I had and that we had about this. So
yeah, so you might welcome me bringing that up, I'm guessing. Yeah, nothing more needs to be said, but I'm happy for background offline. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. Yeah.
And Mr. Fye, were there other hands up as well for folks we should go to in particular next?
Yes, Commissioner Sullivan.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for Mr. Letourneau. You mentioned the very unusual and welcome news of that project finishing early. Was there also a cost savings as a result of that, which would be equally unusual and welcome?
We have not been told of a cost savings at this point. I think the work really was really for the Orange Line, and that work is being accomplished. I think the issue was the timing of when certain components of that work on the track had to take place, when trains could run through those Orange Line stations. The original plan going back was to keep the stations open and allow Silver Line trains to pass using single tracking. And because of some of the new social distancing that had to take place with the contractor, as well as some of the workforce issues with the contractor, it was just determined that that was not a safe way to approach it. And so they were able to complete by sort of changing some of the schedule for when certain parts of the project were taking place they were able to essentially complete that work a little earlier than they anticipated and be able to reopen the stations so that trains can move through safely. Then the other piece of this was to take advantage of the fact that those stations and the Silver Line was shut down in order to be able to do the phase 1 and phase 2 tie-in. The computer systems on those two phases are different because they were designed at different times, at different people, different companies. That's not unusual in a rail system to have multiple different computer systems, but we have to make sure that phase 1 and phase 2 work with each other and that doesn't mess up the whole system. So that was a real concern about the phase 2 Silver Line project going into the summer. And I think being able to actually have the line completely shut down for this period of time has enabled them to, on the construction side, do that work a lot more quickly. That is not a WMATA project per se. That's a MEMWA project because it's part of the Silver Line construction project, but it is nevertheless very welcome.
Thanks very much.
Madam Chair, this is John Bell. I had a quick question for Matt, if you have a moment.
Please.
Yeah, Matt, has there been any discussion about as we hopefully move forward, from phase 3 and beyond, about public messaging for the cleaning and other safety measures that are being taken? And I don't know if Paul wants to comment on this or not, because I think letting people know that it's safe to use Metro is going to be important.
Yes, Senator Bell, first of all, welcome to the commission, to my Loudoun County, my Dulles South colleague. We're only a mile or so from each other here on video screen. Yes, there has been quite a bit of that. And one of the things, Metro's doing extensive customer surveys about the consumer confidence. And one of the things that the public wants to see is not just that Metro's cleaning trains, but that they're cleaning trains physically in front of them. So Metro has adjusted some of the maintenance schedules in order to be able to have cleaning personnel actually on site in stations during the day, doing spot cleaning as people are coming and going from the stations. Paul, is there anything you want to do that?
No, I mean, I think that is a good summary. Senator Bell, WMATA actually has been a leader in this area nationally amongst some of the other authorities or operations around the country, and people have been turning to WMATA to see what they're doing in this regard. There was good planning on our safety officer's part early on, so we were fully prepared with materials and equipment and everything that we needed to get through this. And I think the question will be how much of this becomes the norm moving forward, or at least for the foreseeable future anyway. More to come on this, but WMATA has taken some pretty, aggressive steps to make sure that the health and the safety, not only of its workers, but the riders, is top of mind.
Yeah, Paul Wiedefeld actually serves a big role on a American Public Transit Association task force on COVID response. So he, as Paul said, he really has been nationally leading the conversation about what transit systems should be doing.
Madam Chair, just quick follow-up on that. I appreciate the answers from both of you. I guess my only thing is, if anything, I would encourage any use of public information, public service announcements, just to get the message out of all the great things you're doing. Because I think, that the concern I'm hearing from people is they just want to know it's safe to use it. And if they know what else is happening, then I think it'll make it easier. And I'm hoping we can get some public interest type, stuff on the news to let people know all the great things that are being done.
Yeah, and there was a rollout of that, Senator Bell, when it was announced at the WMATA board meeting, and we can follow up with you on some of the toolkits that WMATA has that can be shared, so that you can let our constituents know as well.
Thank you. Yep, I'm happy to share it, and I think that's a great idea for all of us to share it as much as we can.
Yeah, and Senator Bell, I think there's a lot of thinking going on right now amongst the 3 states about how we're going to get people back on transit. So they don't get back in their cars after all this investment and everything that we have here, and the trends that we were seeing up until the pandemic. So I think there's going to be a lot of coordination between the 3 NADL jurisdictions to get people back in transit.
Madam Chair, this is Eileen.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Senator Bell said, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we probably can help out and share that information. I think would be good, the proper channels to actually get that information out. A lot of us have regular virtual town hall meetings. We send out updates, several times a week. So once you have that information, any information you want us to share and or social media posting and tweeting, I think that can be helpful.
Thank you. If I could bring in Ms. Mattice, I know that this is, staff is poised to play a role in this regard as well, with sort of the advertising and the word of mouth. So hopefully we can look to the commission staff as a source too, to package some of those sound bites or high level points that we can help disseminate.
Absolutely. I was actually going to mention it in my remarks later, but it might be perfect to talk about that now. Indeed, we are going to be doing another marketing effort. Originally, it was scoped to be after the shutdown on the Orange Line. Obviously, it's a very different scope now, but one of the things I think that's really important in this marketing campaign, again, it's about getting people on transit. Yes, it's all about Metro, but it's all about any of our transit systems. So we're working very closely with all of our local transit providers, and we'll also be working with WMATA, just like we did last year, that we coordinate the timing and what the message is. So that's actually something that we work on. We're very fortunate we get the grant from DRPT with shared funding from all the localities. So that's something we're doing a lot of thinking about now, but also know we want to be very time sensitive and message sensitive. And so while we originally were thinking about this would be after Labor Day, which was when the Orange Line construction, we expect it's going to be after that. But that the confidence and the messaging to get people back on transit is something that we're very focused on, and making sure that people don't hop directly into their cars and then we're sort of taking 3 steps back.
And Madam Chair, this is Mike Turner. If I can just really quickly make a comment.
Absolutely.
I called our health director yesterday because the data to me is starting to indicate that this is ultimate, and I'm thinking long game, 6, 8 months, 9 months down the road. Ultimately, I think this is going to distill down to 3 major things. I call them employing our WMD against the virus: wash, mask, and distance. Those 3 things are probably going to drive any marketing effort, and they're very simple. And I said, am I being overly simplistic if we train the population to wear masks, we train them to stay 6 feet apart whenever possible, and we train them to regularly wash their hands? Haven't we basically just done everything we need to do? And all the other complicated mechanisms of phases and big ride transit or in your car or what events you go to, theoretically at that point, if we can train the population to follow those 3 things pretty rigorously, then that's probably going to be the new normal for at least a year. And I said, is that overly simplistic? He said, no, not at all. And my daughter lives in Phoenix, and she says they have not practiced social distancing or masking since day one. So what's happening there is not a surprise. And Virginia managed, you can't walk around in Virginia without seeing virtually everybody in a mask. So we have managed to inculcate that those disciplines into our culture. And I think any marketing program, to the extent that we can distill it down to those 3 basic steps in anything that we do, we're probably going to be money ahead in terms of simplicity of message.
Thanks, Mr. Turner. I also just want to jump in. I think Commissioner Reed has been waiting patiently with a hand up. So before we move on too much further, Mr. Reed, Delegate Reed, if you could.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So thanks, Matt and Paul, for all of the really good information. I apologize if you already covered this because I had to log out of the app and log back in. But do we actually have a good time frame on when we're expecting the Silver Line to be open out here in Loudoun County? And then how confident would we be with that particular date?
I guess I'll take this one. One of my favorite topics, Delegate Reed. So, I mean, the short answer to your question is probably no and no, but I can give you parameters. I think we are based on what we're hearing from the Airports Authority. With some caveats, they are anticipating being able to complete construction by the end of this year, which then would allow a process by which WMATA does testing and take control and get ready probably sometime around this time next year, if not a little sooner, as early as the spring or potentially into the summer. On there are that there are still a number of outstanding issues on the project that are being worked through as we speak, and we've covered this in some of the WMATA committee meetings here at NVTC, but as we speak, the Inspector General has a contractor in that's looking at all 1,700 concrete panels in phase 2. And that inspection report hopefully will come to the WMATA board. I'm hoping by the end of the month. And then, what the resolution to that will be. I caught some attention apparently when I said at this meeting last month that, WMATA is not, NVTC is not going to rip up all the concrete and all the stations and rebuild them. And I will repeat that. Obviously, those of us who travel in this corridor know all the structures are there already. But what it is a question of is what the future maintenance obligations would be. Are there things that are unexpected and so on? And that needs to be negotiated between the Airport Authority, their contractor, and then ultimately to the satisfaction of WMATA. The WMATA board won't take the project until we are satisfied that all of these issues are on a trajectory to be solved in a way that won't saddle the system with long-term concerns. So those are the caveats. That said, they are making good progress. Heavy construction is almost complete. And at this point, they're working on a couple of specific issues at the rail yard as it relates to the lifts and the ballast inside the track. And then this concrete panel issue, and then a few other issues that are sort of on a path towards getting resolved. But in any project like this, a lot of this comes down to the contractor, their willingness to make the changes that they need to make at the end of the project, the negotiating position that they take on some of these things. And I do have some concerns that could slow things down as we move forward.
Yeah. Also, Madam Chair, if I could just add one thing, Delegate Reed, the tie-in with the software sounds like it should be an easy issue, but it's actually a really significant issue, and they were a little behind in that. And so there's still some work in that area to do as well. And that's one project that we're, hoping that they can resolve, relatively quickly, because that's going to be key to, to seeing, the 2 phases joined there.
Thanks, Mr. Smedberg.
Madam Chair.
Please, Mr. Snyder.
Hi, thanks very much. Three quick questions. First, this is a very helpful dialogue about how to get people back into using transit. And I'm wondering if some of our messaging could be delivered to the commercial real estate industry and to the business sector in general, because I'm continuing to hear thoughts that transit riders will not be permitted to return to their offices, even though others would be. So that would be point number one. Point number two, does Metro get any kind of a sense about the percentage of riders that are actually using it all the time as opposed to just some of the time? And what education are you doing for riders within the stations? And finally, what sort of financial deficit is Metro running at this point due to the reduction in ridership? And when will we know what additional obligations may be placed on state and local government as a result? Thank you.
I could start with the last question because that's probably, believe it or not, the easiest one. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, although Paul and I have documents upon documents of spreadsheets elsewhere in my iPad with some of this information. But the bottom line is Metro is receiving $860 million from the CARES Act. And that is based upon what our needs are and what our allocation is. And it's the belief of Metro staff that that amount will be sufficient to cover the revenue losses that we have been incurring as a result of the drop in ridership. And so there are no plans to ask for an increase in the jurisdictional subsidies, at least in the foreseeable future. And in fact, as Paul said, for fiscal year 21, MANA actually flowed through that CARES Act money and is providing a reduction in the subsidy for local governments. One of the big issues here, I think about, the beginning of this, I talked about this when I gave one of my updates. One of the big issues was whether or not the reduction in ridership revenue was an acceptable reimbursement for the federal government through the CARES Act. And that was a little bit of a question because WMATA is somewhat unique in that we receive our money from so many different sources. It's very easy to calculate this in places like New York when there's like a particular tax that's a funding source for the MTA. And so you can very clearly measure the reduction in the revenue coming in. For WMATA, yes, there was the actual ridership revenue, but then there's the subsidy piece of this. And so the inability of local governments to make their subsidy payments as a result of our own reductions in revenue, is that a reimbursable expense for the CARES Act? And ultimately, WMATA did a great job working that out with the FTA and being able to essentially include that in the calculation. So I'm pretty confident that you're not going to see a request to cover lost expenses given the amount of money that WMATA is receiving. Obviously, though, we'll have to see what ridership is over the long term, and then what adjustments have to be made from a service standpoint to try to right size for that. But I think we're reluctant to make any of those really big changes right now when we're not sure what the what the future looks like. Paul, I don't know if you have anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, obviously the losses are significant for obvious reasons, but WMATA financial staff made some good moves early on that put us in position to have cash on hand and help us ride this out to a large degree. And then recently went to the market for some issuances in the bond market, and things were extremely favorable there, as best we know so far, is the indications coming back to us. So I think they're making the right moves to help get us through this, but there are, and again, as Matt said, I can't pull up the information right now, but the losses are significant, as they are across the nation. But I think they've made some good moves to help us even this out as best we can.
On the other questions, Mr. Snyder, I think WMATA staff can probably better answer that right now than we could. I know they do have data on ridership and who's using. I don't know how detailed it is. And then they've created these various lines of communication with businesses and the business community, the GSA, and others, communicating about things like that policy you mentioned, which some employers have talked about, where they're saying you can't take transit. Right now, all I've heard on that is more anecdotal than it is, anybody actually doing that. But I know that it's something that the staff is tracking, and I'm sure, maybe Mr. Potts, who I think is on, either can help us with that now or follow up with that, some of that information.
Yeah, and Mr. Snyder, Metro staff, they are in constant contact with OPM, DOD, some of the other larger agencies, the private employers through groups like Matt and I participated once with the Tyson's working group, and a few others. There's been various surveys that are going out. People are providing more and more information about what they're thinking about and when they're thinking about bringing people back and how. So they're gathering a lot of information right now to best plan for that. Because as we've said in the past, you just can't decide, on a Tuesday, okay, we're going to, full throttle, and then Wednesday it happens. It takes weeks to, to sort of plan and build up to that point again. So a lot of that work is going on right now, and just gathering as much information as they can. But they're anticipating potentially, some of the government, some of the larger agencies do go back sooner than expected. So they're working on that now.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Mr. Snyder, for the question.
Madam Chair.
Please, Ms. Polchak.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. First of all, I do want to thank Mr. Smedberg, Mr. Letourneau for your help and what you may have done behind the scenes to help ensure that we did have a faster reopening, and for your participation in the Tyson's group. I know it's very much appreciated. When we talk about masks and safety for reopening, my understanding is we do have quite a stockpile of masks. Last I heard, I did not know that if we had a plan other than I think police had them for getting them to folks, and I believe perhaps VRE and trains also have a plan. So just wanted to see if anything had been decided about how to help ensure more of our riders as we reopen more will have access and be complying with the mask.
That's a great question. I'm going to put a pin in the VRE portion of it because I know I'll have a report from the acting CEO, Mr. Dalton, later, and I know VRE staff has been thinking about that a lot. But to the WMATA piece first, I don't know if either of our board members can speak to it.
On the, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, we do have quite a stockpile, if you will. I think they are going to make some of the masks available to riders, should they ask for them, and they'll be available. They're not going to be actually passing them out, but if obviously someone doesn't have a mask or comes and asks for one, I think they're going to be available that way. That's sort of what they're thinking right now, but we'll see how that goes. People actually have been fairly compliant. I mean, most people entering the stations or on the buses do have some sort of face covering on. So things in that area have actually gone pretty well, much better than expected. Let's put it that way. Much better than expected.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Polchak. I think this is something we've been wrestling with in each of our jurisdictions too, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to hearing the VRE report as well. I believe New York, both Chicago have had plans in place now. So, hopefully as we do see more people, there may be other alternatives to just, hoping and having them in case people do ask for them. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ms. Polchak.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our WMATA board members? Okay, Mr. Vi, I assume nobody else has come in with a raised hand, right?
No one raised hands, Madam Chair.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, well, the general theme of WMATA, I have the opportunity to give a brief report as the chair of our 3% cap working group. As those of you who were with us last month will remember, as I know our members of the General Assembly will remember, this is a legislative opportunity to bring a group of stakeholders together to talk about the 3% cap on operating budget increases in the jurisdictional subsidies, which was imposed with the 2018 capital funding legislation and has been, as I've described in the past, I think a double-edged sword for us, both helpful to add some predictability to our WMATA bills, but challenging in that it has sometimes prevented opportunities for growth and service or been applied in ways that I know Virginia jurisdictions and this commission have found somewhat frustrating. So we have brought together that group of stakeholders. Thank you to those of you on the commission who recommended individuals, particularly from the private sector. We met for the first time to discuss the work ahead of us. Ahead of the meeting, helpfully, working group members met with NVTC staff to offer their perspective on the 3% cap as it exists and its exclusions. So this meeting provided an opportunity for the working group to react to a summary of those discussions and begin refining their assessment of the cap's effectiveness. So our staff, particularly Zach Smith, has been doing just a phenomenal job at the research and summary. The staff pulled together and presented information on the historical operating subsidy payments to WMATA, and then the subsidy payments since WMATA began applying the cap to help implement that 2018 legislation. So that information, that trend line was really useful in particular, helping the working group distinguish between the perceived impact of the cap and the real impact on our jurisdictions. So really, again, that very quality analysis that we are happy to share with any interested commissioners. The working group wrapped up by discussing a set of guiding principles to evaluate potential recommendations on the cap to the General Assembly, or potential modifications or even alternatives to the current cap. And I just wanted to editorialize that I particularly appreciated. We have representation from each of the transportation leads in the jurisdictions, and for that group in particular, as well as our private sector representatives, just a real thoughtfulness, a constructiveness, a desire for a partnership with WMATA on this issue as well as others. I think, in summary from this first conversation, there were real nuances of opinion and perhaps gradations or differences of opinion on those nuances among the members. But generally speaking, I think there is a broad consensus that the cap or something like it will continue to be important for the jurisdictions. So we look forward to considerable more work ahead. The working group is still in the very early stages of developing our findings. We will meet again at the end of July and then in September to draft a report to the House Appropriations Committee and Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee as per the legislation before its due date on November 10th. So we are going to meet with the WMATA committee of this body next to give an update on the 3% cap working group and get feedback from them at the July 16th meeting. So if this topic is of interest to you, you'd like to dig in a little further, a great way to do that would be to show up to that July 16th meeting, which is in fact open to all members of the commission. Kate, did you want to add anything about the kickoff of the working group?
I think I'm just really echoing your comments. It's been really fantastic to have the frank and open conversations by the working group participants, both in the one-on-ones as well as around the virtual table, because of course we did it through virtual means. I'm very fortunate. Next week, I actually have the opportunity to have some one-on-one conversations with the other funding broad-sent jurisdictions when it comes to WMATA. So I actually will have a conversation with WMATA as well as with the district and Maryland folks that pay attention to these things. So I'm looking forward to hearing from their perspective, sort of how this all plays together. Obviously, this is a Virginia report. This is an NVTC recommendations that will move forward, but I thought it would be very helpful to hear from all of the other parties involved and have that inform our conversation. But again, a big thanks to Zach Smith and our team in putting all of this together. It's really been fantastic. And we really look forward to feedback from the WMATA committee, continue engagement with the working group, and then of course, working towards a presentation to the commission in the fall for consideration and then forwarding on to the General Assembly committees. That's all I have. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Let me pause for questions about the 3% working group, and then we will go to the chair of our WMATA committee. Okay, seeing no questions. Our Vice Chairman, Kanika Aguirre, who is the chair of our NVTC WMATA committee, over to you. Mr. Aguirre, are you on mute, possibly?
Yeah, here we go.
Thanks.
The wonders of technology. So not too much to report. As has been mentioned, our meeting will be July 16th, where we'll be getting an update on the 3% working group, as well as discussing the 2020 update to the annual report on the performance and condition of WMATA. And that's basically all I have for today.
Thanks. Excellent. All right. Oh, and forgive me, I also have failed to introduce that we probably would have been helpful for the prior item. Mr. Greg Potts, who is WMATA's lead for Virginia Government Relations, is with us. So, Mr. Potts, thank you for joining us. If anybody had any lingering questions from that WMATA report that they'd like to pose to WMATA staff, now would be your opportunity.
Hi, this is Mike Turner. Can I just ask the sequence on the report? Will it be drafted by the committee? Will the NVTC get to look at it before it's submitted? What's the sequence of the various drafts and the timing to?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So hopefully our November meeting is before the November 10th deadline. So that will be the commission's final opportunity to take a look. I know that we will engage first with the WMATA committee. I hope we'll engage with that committee again in that sort of run up, the more iterative work ahead of the full commission look. So that's roughly our plan. Absolutely expect the opportunity for weigh in from commissioners in November. And again, an open invitation to join the WMATA committee to discuss it in greater depth as well.
And Madam Chair, if I could add, just especially for our new commissioners, we always try to be bringing any items that are for approval, like a report, recommendations, we bring them to somewhat workshop in 1 month and then approval the next. That doesn't always work out, but that is what our current plan is. And so the idea would there would be a discussion and dialogue at our October meeting and then coming back with the final document for approval in November.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. All right, seeing I think no other questions about WMATA. We do have an update on our commuter choice program, which I think all will remember has been slightly delayed due to the uncertainty surrounding the pandemic and shutdown response. So I'm so glad that Ms. Matthijs is here to give us a little bit of an update on how this is likely to proceed going forward.
Absolutely. And again, we wanted to do this because just like with a lot of the WMATA items, this is one of the major actions that will be coming to the commission in the fall. It's going to be a busy fall for us. So just as a reminder, at our May meeting, the commission did authorize staff to let CTB know that we were going to delay the selection of our next round of projects. This round of projects is a 2-year program, fiscal year 21 and 22. And again, the reason for the delay is that the funding of the program is based on that current year of revenues. So for example, it's FY21 would literally be what's being collected right now. And so we did get some indication from VDOT in terms of the reduction in toll revenues received during the very first beginning of when we were no longer traveling. And so we're obviously working very closely with them on how that, especially 66 in this case, how that's rebounding. And so again, over the course of the summer, we do plan on working very closely with VDOT as well as with DRPT. They're our partners in this program so that we can come back in the fall. I did want to point in the materials that were provided is an overview of all the projects that have applied, especially for our new commissioners. Please take a moment. There's just sort of one-pagers that give a highlight of each of the projects. The priorities for this program are projects that move the most people. That's really the biggest one, but also making sure you're finding alternatives to transportation, keeping people from diverting onto side roads and other things. So those are really the things that are for this program. What we have is 14 applications for eligible projects for round 4 of commuter choice for 66 corridor. And the request is for about $33.7 million for this 2-year program. Now we were anticipating we'd have 25 million. So that's for that 2-year period of time. So that's really where we need to look and see, is there going to be 25 million? Do we anticipate there's going to be 25 million so that you as the commission can decide sort of how much of that funding program or how conservative it is or what have you. Again, we do have 2 years to make that up. So the other part of that is, of course, we do seek public comment on our projects. We had started the public comment period. Of course, things changed, so we put it on hold. So what we're asking, we've actually sort of already received approval, but sort of notifying to all of you, we do plan on reopening that right around Labor Day so we can get good comments in anticipation of the commission taking action. And just like I had said to Mr. Turner a moment ago, We plan on having a conversation in one meeting and approval in the next. And the final step for the commuter choice program, because it is using toll revenues that are from the Commonwealth, is always then for us to go to CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, for them to affirm that we've done the process right and for to approve those projects to get funded.
Kate, thank you. And just to kick off the questions, as a reminder, query, when I was asking you the other day, this is the same program of projects that we had applications for back in the spring. There are no new projects here, right?
No, no new projects.
Other questions about the commuter choice program?
I have one, Chair Crystal.
Please, Mr. Letourneau.
Kate, the two Loudoun County projects are both bus routes, the 88X and the a new Percival route. They're both listed in the application as running to Reston Wheelie. I know the county's service plan is to change that service when the Silver Line Phase 2 starts and run them either to the Ashburn or the Loudoun Gateway stations. Is that permissible with commuter choice to shift the destination? How does that work?
So the most, thank you for the question. The most important thing is that that the performance metrics that are used for evaluating that project, that if there's a switch at all within the scope of that there's not going to be a reduction in what was anticipated for ridership. So we definitely can have our staff circle back with Loudoun County staff on that. But that's the most important thing because we're evaluating based upon performance. And so if there's an anticipated change in a negative way to that performance, then we really need to have a good conversation about it.
Yeah, I would certainly anticipate that it would actually be the opposite, and that the performance would improve because it's going to be a shorter trip, and there'll be more interest in getting to those Loudoun metro stations. But thanks.
If I can just follow up with that, and Matt, I can ask you too. Are the two Loudoun applications that are in right now based on a projected passenger throughput or actual past numbers of passenger throughput? You mentioned one of them's a new line. If it's one based on past, obviously the Ashburn, we're going to have more. I agree with you. I think we have more volume because we're going to have more round trips and probably more usage. But it'll be a projected number, not an actual number.
So, and we could definitely circle back to those applications. In general, we do ask the applicant to identify what they anticipate is going to be the ridership. Many instances, these are brand new services, so it can never be based on past. So we do a reasonableness assessment as to what the projected ridership is, but I'm happy to have follow up directly with you, with our staff who know the details of each of the applications.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about specific projects or the program of projects or the process? Okay. Seeing none, and I know Ms. Matthijs will absolutely be available for any further questions as we approach September. We have next report regarding the Virginia Railway Express. So no action items this month, but I am glad to welcome Mr. Dalton to give a report. And Mr. Dalton, I know you join us having just joined our sister commission first, BRTC. So I'm not sure if you were here. We had a good question from Commissioner Palchik about how VRE as well as WMATA is approaching the issue of masks and ensuring that the requirement to wear masks is in fact present among our riders. So if you wouldn't mind wrapping that into your report, which I suspect may have been on your docket already.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick sound check. Can you hear me okay?
You sound good.
Excellent. So again, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, commissioners and others. In your packet, you have our COVID-19 update memo and the CEO report from June. So I'll just simply provide a brief overview. VRE continues to operate at a reduced service level. For the month of June, ridership increased from approximately 620 daily riders at the beginning of the month to approximately 1,000 riders by the end of the month. As ridership continues to increase, we will lengthen existing trains and add trains up to our normal service level to add more seats in order to manage social distancing. Our on-time performance for the month of June was similar to the month of May at 93% system-wide. Throughout the month of June, we continued to incorporate different measures to welcome the return of our riders, installation of signage for social distancing, enhanced cleaning processes, and the installation of hand sanitizer dispensers on board our trains and at stations occurred. Passengers are required to wear face coverings, and we are currently seeing a nearly 100% daily compliance. Our train conductors do have face coverings available on board every VRE train in the event our riders need one. What we have found is people simply forget in some cases, and then in other cases, we have our passengers have a face covering in the morning during the morning commute, and then in the afternoon they can't find it or they've misplaced it or whatever. So again, our conductors on board each of our trains do have face coverings for our passengers and they can either ask for one, or our conductors actually, if they see a passenger without a face covering, we'll approach them and ask them if they need one. We are pushing daily messaging through social media or direct communications with our riders and other means to highlight the measures that we have taken and provide our riders with the information to bring them back to VRE. VRE staff continues to work remotely, and all of our business functions are fully operational, and we continue to maintain a continuity of operations. In the coming weeks, I'll report on preliminary FY 2020 financial results. Now that we are in FY 2021, we continue to scenario plan and refine projections for ridership, revenue, and expenses. And then finally, Madam Chair, I just would like to thank Delegate Reed for taking the time yesterday to allow myself and other staff to show him a glimpse of the VRE operations and the enhancements that I've mentioned earlier that we have made on board our trains and at our stations and at our maintenance and storage facilities. That's the end of my overview report, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dalton. Ms. Reed, I think you've gotten the most recent tour of any of us. So you had a chance to see some of these policies in action.
Yes, Madam Chair. So first of all, I'd really like to just thank Rich and his team for taking time yesterday. I think I spent about 3 hours with them, and it was really a very educational experience to be able to see the Broad Run maintenance and storage facility. And then I think we went up to, I'm just looking at the map, I think we went up to Burke Center and then took the train back down to Broad Run. And so it was really nice to be able to get a firsthand experience and visit of all the things that they're doing. And I really do believe that they're doing an amazing job, especially in kind of applying best practices for both cleaning and sanitizing and doing the social distancing on the train from a lot of different industries and a lot of different sources. And so it was really impressive to see what it was that they're doing. Because as we've talked about earlier, I think one of the things that people are going to have to do is they're going to have to feel comfortable coming back into that environment. And I can tell you that I felt very comfortable being in the VRE environment and being on the train because of the work that they're doing. So again, thanks to Rich and his team for for giving me the opportunity to see everything, as well as for all that they're doing every day, because they're doing really truly an amazing job, and it's very much appreciated. So thanks, Rich, and thanks to your team.
It was a powerful testimonial. Thank you, Delegate Reed. Any other questions for Mr. Dalton? Commissioner Palchik, I don't know if you'd wanted to follow up at all in the masks query.
I'm trying to unmute. There we go. No, I really appreciate that. And Mr. Dalton, while I don't have VRE stations in my district, I really appreciate your report. And so my understanding, and that's kind of my thought, would be that even if everyone has them in the morning, right, by the end of the day, maybe you've forgotten it, you don't have your extra one. And I appreciate that your conductors are more, sounds like they are proactively asking people if they need one, and hopefully has not risen to confrontations, which I know is probably one of the fears of being more proactive about handing out masks or face coverings. Do you know if there have been any, confrontations from those interactions?
No, there hasn't been. Again, it's once the order came out, and it took a couple of days, I think, before everybody sort of got into the mode, if you will, to ensure that they had a face covering. There hasn't been. I have to tell you, our passengers are, a lot of them are just longtime loyal riders of VRE, and they see the efforts that we're going through, and they heed to our I'll just say request, if you will. And our request is, this is a partnership, and we, we're going to do our part, and so simply we're asking you to do your part as well. And it's just a very simple, a simple approach. And but I do anticipate, to some degree, being a realist, that as ridership does increase and we start, getting to the point where we are seeing, managing social distancing might be a little bit of a challenge, and that's why I've stated that we want to stay ahead of that demand, make sure that we have seats available, trains, and I think with that approach, we'll continue to minimize that angst and continue to enhance the comfort of our passengers. So that's my not only optimistic look, but my realistic look as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I wish I could hear you every day with that outlook. But no, and I understand that, sometimes WMATA may be less of those, long-term committed riders, and we may have more short-term or guest riders. But I do hope that we're able to use more of your model and to hear that it's gone so well for our bus services as well as our WMATA service. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Any other questions?
No hands are raised.
Seeing none, I'll add just a note. Serving as I do as the chair of the search committee for the permanent CEO of the VRE, just a brief update, which is that the search committee has concluded its work, presented a recommendation to the whole of the operations board, which the operations board will consider at our July 17th meeting, at which time we hope very much to have a recommendation of the full board to bring before the commissions shortly after the August recess in early September. If you have any questions about that process or how it's going or how it's been, you are welcome to ask me personally, and Commissioner Elizabeth Bennett Parker is also the vice chair of the VRE Operations Board and serves on that committee as well. Okay, so we are moving into our penultimate report. I'm so glad to welcome Director Mitchell of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to give us a brief update. A quick note as well, we also provided the Commission with 2 blue-sheeted certification letters that hopefully you received earlier this afternoon. They may be helpful to follow along during Director Mitchell's report. Those are 2 letters that WMATA sent to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. They document first compliance with requirements that are associated with the capital fund, and also certification that no alternate directors violated the WMATA bylaws regarding alternate participation, which is also part of that enabling legislation associated with the capital fund. The letters are provided as information only, the ones that were received earlier today. So Director Mitchell, if you'd like to allude to those at all in your report, or if your report is on entirely different topics, that's fine as well. So welcome.
No, thank you. And as it relates to those reports, these are certifications that WMATA provides to us every year. It's related to the legislation that was passed setting up the dedicated funding from the state for WMATA along with DC and Maryland. It does include certifications related to the use of alternates, and also that WMATA has met other certain requirements. We did just receive the certifications from WMATA. They were due on July 1st. Our next step is that we at DRPT review those. We will then come back to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in September as a workshop item with a recommendation regarding any withholding of funds or not related to WMATA's compliance with those items. And then the Commonwealth Transportation Board would take action on that in October. So that's the schedule for those going forward. I won't repeat some of the items that are in our written report this month, but I do want to note just a couple things. We have just issued 4 grant agreements to some of the localities represented here for mitigation transit service related to the WMATA Platform Improvement Project. That includes a $477,000 grant to Arlington County for curb and traffic management at the Boston Metro Rail station. About $90,000 grant to the city of Fairfax for a shuttle to the VRE Berks Center Station. Also, $560,000 to Fairfax County for supplemental Fairfax connector service and commuter assistance programs, and another $70,000 to PRTC and OmniRide for supplemental OmniRide service. We're also still working with NVTC on the grant that Kate referenced earlier. That'll be $296,000. That'll for implementation of the post platform improvement program marketing program. So the total amount of those grants totals about 1.5 million of DRPT funds. So they're all awaiting execution from the local systems, but we're looking forward to getting those in place. As Kate mentioned before, some of the actual implementation of those are going to be delayed somewhat because of the COVID-19 response. Just a couple of other items. July 1st marked the beginning of the new transportation funding scenarios under the omnibus bill that just passed. That also was the official date in which the Passenger Rail Authority is now a legal entity. We are continuing to work on standing up that authority. We expect it's going to be a 6 to 12 month process to get that group fully stood up. In the meantime, DRPT will continue to execute the responsibilities of the authority as it relates to passenger rail, but we are continuing to work on that that mobilization process right now. And then finally, I do want to thank Rich and his staff from VRE. We've been working very closely with them because our Virginia Rail Initiative is actually going to fund some projects that VRE was originally planning to fund through their capital program, or it's changed the scope of those projects that's necessary, and that has therefore freed up some additional state and regional resources. Some of that includes $17 million of NVTA funding that's now been freed up from projects at the Lorton platforms and also Ripon that no longer need to move forward. And so that money has been deobligated by the VRE board and is now part of the funds that the NVTA board is considering for allocation at their next meeting. We're continuing to work with VRE on other similar scenarios because with the new Virginia rail funding, it does change some of the scopes of the projects and the timing necessitated for those too. So stay tuned on that. If there is more information regarding other funding sources that will be changing, we'll certainly bring those forward to you as well. So, and that concludes my report. Happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Director Mitchell. Questions regarding the DRPT report?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fye. Well, I can say that we've been delighted to work with, as VRE, work with DRPT on that effort in particular regarding the funds and seeing those other incredibly important projects related to the development of the corridor allocated as we proceed on that whole program of projects.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we will move into our last but never least report. Our final one is the Executive Director report. Ms. Matthijs, I will turn the microphone over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do actually have a number of things, but I plan not to keep you guys too long this evening. But I did want to pass on to you updates on two federal legislative items that likely will be of interest to many of you. It does look like the FY21 federal appropriations for the WMATA dedicated funding that's often referred to as PREA, we've heard this before, it does appear to be moving through Congress. And so actually, just as a reminder, since about 2009, WMATA has received $150 million most years. There's a couple of years there was some haircut, but $150 million a year, and that's actually matched by DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So it's actually a total of $300 million in funding to WMATA that helps with really critical state of good repair capital projects. And so the good thing is it's moving through the House right now, and that's already expected to have action in the House prior to the August recess. Yeah, the Senate schedule is a little bit less unknown, but the fact that there is an appropriation moving forward is very promising. Now, for the longer term, there's actually been action this week on the House of Representatives on a major infrastructure authorization bill, HR 2. which is the Moving Forward Act. And that was actually passed by the full House of Representatives just earlier this week. And in terms of the transportation, it's actually a huge infrastructure bill. On the transportation side, though, it's looking at more than $100 billion for public transit and $300 billion for road and bridge improvements from FY20 through 25. It also triples Amtrak funding to $29 billion. And another interesting amendment that was put in there, and I'm sure Jennifer Mitchell is quite aware of it, but it actually authorizes the Park Service to give over federal land on either side of Long Bridge for recreation. So we'll see how that keeps moving forward. And it also invests about $1.4 billion in alternative vehicle charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of things related to transportation in general. And so the other thing that's in there, this is sort of getting back to the PREA, it actually does include a 10-year reauthorization of the dedicated funding for WMATA. It starts actually at the $150 million a year, but by year 10, it gets up to $200 million a year. And again, it envisions that it'd be matched by Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So because I know all of you are representing a whole bunch of other interests other than transportation, just to throw out you this HR2 includes infrastructure for schools and childcare facilities, a whole bunch of financing tools for state and local governments, Build America bonds, new market tax credits, private activity bonds. It has affordable housing infrastructure and rehabilitation tax credits, investments in broadband, shoring up drinking water, state revolving funds, as well as wastewater infrastructure, energy infrastructure that's focused on clean energy, upgrades to hospitals, modernizing the postal service, and also cleanup of coal mines and leftover oil and gas wells. So there's a huge infrastructure package. And I think, if anybody reads the news, the action in the Senate, it's really unclear. But the fact that the action was taken by the House includes substantial improvements for transit, and in particular for our area includes the WMATA dedicated funding, is a very promising step. We'll sort of see what happens with that. So I did want to pass that along. Just changing topics a little bit. I know I provided an email right after the commission meeting last time, but I'm really, again, very proud of my folks because we won the Virginia Transit Association Outstanding Public Transportation Regional Marketing Award. And that was actually for our marketing activities after last year's shutdown. We've already talked about what we're planning on doing, but it's really an honor for our folks to be recognized. And in particular, a shout out to Matt Friedman, Jay Watkins, and Melissa Walker on our staff who really led that effort, created a new website, teamed with a lot of our jurisdictional staff to really put together a pretty snazzy marketing campaign. So we're looking forward to doing that again this year. Earlier this evening, in our consent agenda, we did have one item in there, but there's a ton of work goes into it. So I do want to do a shout out to our grants manager and disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE officer, Brittany Sumpner, who she really did an incredible amount of work on our disadvantaged business enterprise goal setting. That is something that's taken very seriously by the Federal Transit Administration. And we worked very closely with the city of Alexandria because we actually manage the federal grants for transit on behalf of the city of Alexandria, also Falls Church as well. But this year was Alexandria, they were included in that. And part of it was Brittany worked with the city to host their first ever virtual DBE public consultation event. And so this was soliciting feedback on sort of how the city in their contracting could be better at reaching out to more companies that were small and disadvantaged businesses. And it was very well received, lots of comments received. Interesting because normally that would be something done in person. This was done virtually, and perhaps they even had more people participating than they would have otherwise. Transitioning a little bit again, you do have our financial reports. That's something we include to you every month. And included in that are the trends for our regional gas tax. As a reminder, the regional gas tax is used for a couple of different things. It's used for towards the WMATA capital dedicated funding. It's also used towards the CROC VREs dedicated funding. And then it's also used by our localities to help pay their WMATA bill. So this is something I gave a heads up of last month. We are starting to see just this report right now does show the precipitous drop off in the month of April. And so I know everybody's following revenue estimates. All of your localities are following it. We're following the state. So this again is something where I do hope and plan at our September meeting to really give a good sense of where those revenues are, what that's looking like, also what the course the toll revenues are looking like. So again, what you do have is through April. We did get actually I should say it's through May. We did just get June's, and we're still sort of going back and forth. It is quite a substantial cut in revenues going to our localities. We do hope that's the bottoming out. So that's why when we can report in September, we're hoping to have a better idea of sort of where things are with that. And then finally, just a reminder, we do not have an August meeting. We do take a break, although I know we have that July 16th WMATA committee meeting, and we are looking forward to everybody who's interested in participating in that. But our next commission meeting will be Thursday, September 3rd. We obviously will be following the guidance of the governor as to what format that looks like. If we are able and guided to be able to have meetings in person, we are going to work the technology to allow for WebEx participation. One of the things to keep in mind is if we are just doing normal meetings, every commissioner can use up to 2 of our regular meetings a year to do virtually. So perhaps use those wisely. Our staff continues to be 100% remote, and we do plan on continuing that through the summer, again, following the governor. Everybody's doing a fantastic job of telecommuting, and so I want to keep everybody happy and safe with that. So that is what I have.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Matthijs. I will say you really got my hopes up for the full spectrum of wonderful things happening with a bill that may face uncertain prospects in the Senate. But thank you for the update, and a huge congratulations to the staff. That's a wonderful recognition for some really hard work. And in particular too regarding the equal investment report that you shared with us was a great piece of writing, and thank you for solving that mystery of why Alexandria was so prominently featured. But it was clearly represented some really aggressive thinking to pursue a more inclusive way of funding and offering public transportation. All right, any questions for Ms. Matthijs? All right. Seeing none, I suspect commissioners know if they ask questions, they're just prolonging their meeting and perhaps the last item they have before the holiday weekend. So, Ms. Matthijs, I don't think you should take it personally. Okay, so thank you all so much. I will go to Mr. Fye for one final round. Any hands waiting that I would be leaving lingering if I didn't attend to?
No hands are raised, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Oh, please, yes, Ms. Garvey.
No hands up. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I mean, this is just really great the way we've carried on, and we're all so quiet. You don't get feedback. I think it's hard. Thank you to Kate and the whole staff, and to yourself, Madam Chair. Really appreciate it. Anyway, I'm just impressed watching everything that's continuing to go on. Thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a safe 4th, and a wonderful summer, and I look forward to seeing people in some form or other in September. So thank you.
Well, Ms. Garvey, I think your comments in particular about how hard Kate and especially the staff have worked to pull off this, which we are, again, broadcasting live simultaneously. It's been no easy feat. A tremendous thanks to them during this very uncertain time for keeping things afloat. And thank you, too, to all of our new commissioners who've joined. It's certainly under unusual circumstances. We'd normally look forward to shaking your hands and seeing you in person, but we are just so thrilled to have you with us. And I hope, like Ms. Garvey, that everyone has a wonderful holiday weekend this weekend. And for those of you that I don't see at the WMATA committee meeting, I hope that you have a wonderful recess and a little bit of time to clear your heads and refresh for all that's ahead. So thank you again so much. Happy 4th of July, and we are adjourned.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.